I'm also messing with the pitch a bit. You can hear
Saving the world, getting a girl, serenade, I remember it all.
I actually put an echo on those breaths, so suddenly it's this kind of...
Wow.
So it becomes part of the texture where there's so few drums.
This episode is being supported by Tapeit. If you currently use voice notes to record your ideas, you should try Tapeit instead.
Maybe controversially or not, I don't know. I mean, some people find it quite annoying, but it also has this Vocaloid replacing my vocal, which I think I did. It's like a free app. I think it's called, is it called Synth V or something? Yeah, Synthesizer V Studio Basic. Yeah, I just use a free version of that. And I've messed around with that before a little bit, but I basically, would type it in, draw it in, and I think I had to manually draw in the bends to make it sound a bit more. I mean, if you listen to...
Give me your heartache, give me your heart.
Like that dipping of the heart, I'm sort of imitating the way I would do it on the demo. So once again, it's sort of this uncanniness I quite like with a lot of my music, where it's clearly this Vocaloid, but I sort of distorted and bent it in a way that's reminiscent of that handheld vocal. And I start doing sort of layers where it's like sort of one note harmonies and pedals and stuff. So, and chopping it up again. But I enjoyed that it was a song that started off as a very DIY vocal demo, and then I find ways to make this artificial voice a little bit more interactive again. And yeah, so if I play the Addison bit, so it's a lot of sort of delays on it, and it's pitched down a little bit. And I also like simply by burying Addison's vocals so much that then when Charli's comes in, it's so much louder and clearer, and it's doubled and panned and all these other things. I mean, Charli's voice always sounds, pretty upfront anyway, but to really compare it with something that's in its kind of like lost in a wormhole.
Yeah. How do you approach processing and recording vocals? I mean, say you've got two different artists there doing different things, and obviously the way that you've processed them afterwards for the song is different again. But when you're getting them in the studio with you, is it the same for everybody? Is it different for everybody?
It's a little bit different. Addison's was done in a studio session, and then Charli's was done in my garage at the time. I sort of the first place I lived in LA properly, and I had this sort of like behind the sort of kind of concrete garden, there was a garage, and I think I mean I've recorded Charli a lot, so I really don't put much on her voice. Yeah, it's funny. In the early PC days, I think I used, what's that classic, like, is it Rode something? And there's a sort of starter mic that everyone has that comes with an interface. So all the early PC stuff was just done with that. And then I got, at the time, I thought it was really expensive, but now it's like massively inflated in price. But I got a secondhand Sony C800G, which is like, I got it for a few £1,000s via a shop. But now it's like 15K or something, and it's like it got used. It's like a bunch of, I think it's like Post Malone and other sort of rap vocals and a bunch of pop as well. And it was known back in the day as a Mariah Carey mic, and
right.
It's got this sort of lineage as like quite a bright, intense, detailed mic. But because I've basically been using the same one of those for not quite a decade, but a really long time, and I've sort of tried to carefully travel with it.
This episode is being supported by our good friends at Tapeit, the iPhone app made specifically for musicians. If you, like many of our guests, use voice memos, then as far as we're concerned, switching to Tapeit is an obvious choice. It's free, and there are a load of features you won't find on Apple's Voice Memos app, including the ability to record straight from your lock screen, set markers, add notes, include photos of settings, and you can easily import your old voice notes, sync to the cloud, and create shared playlists with co-writers and bandmates. So head to the link below to install the app now. And if you want even more, check out Tapeit Pro and use the promo code TAPENOTES to receive a whopping 50% off. And now, back to the episode.
I'll just record Charli on that. I'm not even using a compressor. I mean, I'll use a Logic compressor, but I'll just have a Neve clone preamp, and it's pretty dry. And the nice thing about that mic, because it's so high end and it's so like clean as well, you can stack vocals and you don't really feel the kind of noise of endless stacking. So even I'm not doing a lot of that, but it feels like a bit like using a kind of magnifying glass. So yeah, a bunch of funny Charli demos, even if we're just recording in a garage, we'll be using a pretty decent mic so that I can capture those and not have to go back and retrack it and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But there's a nice thing you can get with the C800 too, where you can make quiet vocal takes feel quite upfront and quite in your face, as well as loud ones. You know, there's some mics, so even if they're really great, you have to like kind of go for it to feel it going for it. With that, you can actually get away. If you do the gain staging sort of right, a very kind of whispered thing can be like right on your ears. So yeah, that's become a little bit of my very lazy engineering signature, like use a really expensive mic and don't do much else. And yeah, there's some fairly subtle stuff I tried to do with the vocals, but nothing crazy interesting. It's more just, you know, the first time you hear it.
Getting the girl, serenade, I remember it all. Brandy and I, look in her eyes.
Has this very soft, you know, and actually there's a sort of funny relation between the first, second verse. I actually separate out the breaths, which I don't always do. I think to go with the ASMR-ness of the guitar. So all the breaths, I think, have some like light sample delay on it to make it slightly more three-dimensional. But then when it comes back in the next one, I actually put an echo on those breaths. So suddenly it's this kind of... Wow. So it becomes part of the texture where there's so few drums. But, you know, it's like, I think the second verse, I'm also messing with the pitch a bit. You can hear...
Saving the world, getting a girl, serenade, I remember it all.
I think this one has more vocal effects than some of the other tracks, simply because I'm really weaving it into this tapestry of all these very micro guitar and synth parts. So it's fun for me to mess with those pitches. And even in the chorus, let's see, I try not to use like harmonizer and things all the time, because I think that's a bit of a easy escape for someone like me. But, you know, here I have a few layers where...
Skin under your skin. Skin under your skin.
You know, so I'm messing with a bit of call and response, and I like always having these counter melodies or little chops like the one in the middle of that one. So I think that's where... I think that's what I try and maybe highlight with my vocals, less so much editing and production, but more tapping into how I'm actually writing, you know. I am always thinking these little counter melodies or other things and voice instrument, etc. So I sort of like to acknowledge that and make it maybe slightly more fiddly than I would if it was a singer that I really respected.